Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and for today's conversation, what I want to talk about is how I believe the next 3D Mario is going to go beyond just being an open world game. Now, some people in the comments are probably going to say, why are you even talking about 3D Mario? It's not coming out anytime soon. I strongly disagree with this notion. I'm sure a lot of you already kind of are on my side on this. Historically speaking, mainline Mario games are always made available within the first two holidays for every single Nintendo console in history. So to suggest that it wouldn't happen this time would be going against the 40 years of history of Nintendo releasing hardware with Mario coming out early on. But then on top of that, the EPD group responsible for Mario Odyssey, that game came out in 2017, and the only other game they've put out since is Donkey Kong Bonanza. That alone does not account for the last 9 years of development. I think that's kind of common sense, not to mention, when you look at the credits for Donkey Kong Bonanza, several key members of the Odyssey team are not there. When you consider all these things, I think it's actually pretty reasonable to think that the next 3D Mario is not that far off. Plus, also, it's rumored. Are the rumors true? Doesn't really matter, because common sense would dictate that yes, the next 3D Mario is not far away. So with that said, what should we expect with this next 3D Mario game? And what I expect for this next 3D Mario game is something that's going to be more open, more expansive than any other prior Mario game. And a lot of that's going to have to do with the fact that Nintendo has been making this game with the Switch 2 in mind, something significantly more powerful than prior hardware. Nvidia has claimed that the Switch 2 is about 10 times more powerful than the Switch 1, and we're hearing about continued DLSS updates. So there's actually a lot of potential that the Switch 2 has that Nintendo has actually really not even tapped into yet. We haven't really seen much on Switch 2 where Nintendo is taking advantage of DLSS, and also we haven't even seen Nintendo make a game ground up for Switch 2 yet that's substantial. Like Donkey Kong Bonanza and Mario Kart World, I would definitely say are substantial and are showcases to an extent, but we do understand that both games started off as Switch 1 projects. And even Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, which from a visual perspective is arguably the best looking game Nintendo's ever put out, that also is a Switch 1 title that's simply been enhanced a bit for Switch 2. So we've really yet to see a ground up Switch 2 game, and with this technology, Nintendo is sure to do something far more impressive and ambitious than any other prior Mario game. There's a lot they can take advantage of here. And I actually want to go back to an interview from many years ago, and Iwata Asks, and this was an interview about Super Mario Galaxy, where the developers are talking about their experience working on Super Mario Galaxy. This game came out back in 2007 for the Nintendo Wii. So here from Shirai, we were coming up with all kinds of ideas which we would note down right away, and then stick them to the wall. I think that another benefit you can only get working with a spherical shaped world is that because you are now able to look up to the stars and see all the different planets out there, you want to travel to those planets. You're also able to discover new things about those planets when you travel to the other side of them. And so reading this, I find it really interesting because they talked about how playing Mario Galaxy, there is something about exploring these planets and looking at what's beyond. But in hindsight, what I find interesting about this is that they were actually pretty limited by the hardware back then. With the Mario Galaxy games, choosing these planets and smaller platforms with these more linear levels, something less open and vast compared to Mario Sunshine and Mario 64, they were able to make a really fun game with a lot of really cool concepts, one of the best Mario games ever, but also still make it really visually pleasing and impressive to many because they were ultimately working with smaller environments with not as much in there. And so these games looked really good. But also with the Wii, you only had one analog stick, so looking around was limited. You couldn't look around all the time, you didn't have a free roam camera. And so this idea of exploring these planets and looking up towards the stars to see what's beyond, I do remember enjoying that back in Galaxy, but I also think that if they were to make a Galaxy-like game again, with the hardware in mind of Switch 2, they could probably pull off a lot more, at least offering a free roam camera and some bigger environments. But I'm not here trying to argue that we're going to get a Mario Galaxy 3. Can Nintendo do sequels? Yes. Mario Galaxy did get a Mario Galaxy 2. but we've never seen numbered sequels for any Mario game going beyond its respective generation. Like Super Mario Bros. 3 came out for the NES and the next one came out for the Super Nintendo, Super Mario World. They moved on from just the numbered entries of Super Mario Bros. You could argue that after 3D World we got 3D Land on 3DS and that was a separate console from the Wii U, but that was the same generation. It's kind of basically the same deal. I don't think Nintendo's going to go back 3 generations and make a Mario Galaxy 3, even with the Mario Galaxy movie coming out and them just having released Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. I do, however, think, especially when we consider all of Nintendo's cross-promotional strategies, that something about this next game will make more people who watch the movie or play Galaxy 1 and 2 want to pick it up. And it simply being a Mario platformer alone will probably lead towards that, but I would not be surprised if there are Galaxy-like elements that we do see in the next game, but it won't be called Mario Galaxy 3. But going back to this Iwata Asks interview, there's another little piece that I want to read through here. Motokura. I think with other games made in the past, if the player traveled from planet to planet, the scenes would have cut out and cut into a completely different planet. But with Super Mario Galaxy, Mario shoots through space from one planet and lands on the new one like a gymnast, so the players can enjoy the adventure continuing seamlessly on the next planet. And with the design is really a title like no other, for instance with the way there are distinct planets floating around within a compact field of outer space. So the first part I want to focus on from this little piece here is just this talk of having an adventure where you're continuing seamlessly onto the next planet. But the thing is about the Mario Galaxy games, yeah, you could have this seamless transition where there wouldn't be a loading screen going from one planet to another, but they are basically all just little platforms. Some platforms might be bigger than another, and some of them may be spherical and there's gravity applied to it so you can go around it, but they wouldn't be like giant separate levels. This wouldn't be like a continuous, seamless open world. These were relatively small experiences, and while the Galaxy games are incredible, considered some of the best in the series, many people were very happy when Nintendo finally went back to having the more open, vast environments in Super Mario Odyssey. And the sales show that. It's the most successful 3D Mario game by far. It's not close. Super Mario Galaxy on Nintendo Wii sold 12.8 million copies, which is an extraordinary number. But it wasn't until Mario Odyssey during the Switch era where 3D Mario finally would be surpassing 2D Mario sales. Mario Odyssey has sold over 30 million copies. And we've talked about this before, it's not just Mario. When Nintendo goes bigger, more expansive, and executes well, they see far stronger sales than prior entries. You look at Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you look at Kirby and the Forgotten Land. It definitely makes sense to think that Nintendo's going to want to follow up Mario Odyssey in some ways. I have a lot of friends in real life that ask me, hey, when are we going to see the next Mario Odyssey sequel? And I'm like, well, they're probably not going to call it Mario Odyssey 2 because they've moved on to another console, but something's coming, and it's definitely going to be something along those lines, something more vast and expansive, and I imagine they're going to go a step further than just having these bigger kingdoms that are separated. Something perhaps more continuous, more interconnected, perhaps something like an open world. And interestingly, we did get Bowser's Fury. Bowser's Fury is an expansion to Super Mario 3D World, which was released on Switch 2, and what's extra fascinating about Bowser's Fury is that yes, it is a continuous world that you slowly unravel and it gets bigger and bigger. It's a vast open environment. It's an open world. It's kind of a small open world at first, but it gets bigger and bigger as you progress. And this is something that's pretty much the complete opposite of what 3D World is. 3D World is one of the linear Mario games, so to include that experience in a linear Mario game, I think kind of goes to show what Nintendo was thinking. They thought, if we include a Bowser's Fury, an open world-like experience, that would probably lead to some strong sales, and yeah, 3D World plus Bowser's Fury did sell pretty well. But it also kind of shows the direction perhaps they are headed with 3D Mario development. And so many people have been in agreement that the next Mario game probably is also going to be fairly expansive, something that has that interconnectivity, something that goes beyond the interconnectivity we see with these smaller little planets in these levels with Mario Galaxy, and perhaps even bigger and more vast and more interconnected than what we saw with Mario Odyssey. Mario Odyssey was interesting though, because before you unlock the Odyssey traveling from each kingdom to another, which are basically just giant levels that you can pick in a level select screen, the first two levels are technically connected. At the end of the Cap Kingdom, you can ride through a power line to get to the Cascade Kingdom, and after that, these kingdoms are no longer connected. But we did see with Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is made by the same EPD group, you have even bigger levels than what we saw in Mario Odyssey, and they are all interconnected. There are these giant holes linking each layer being one whole giant level. So it's clear this EPD production group has had in mind different ways to create interconnected vast worlds. And for some time I've been thinking if they are going to be doing something bigger and more vast, they're probably going to want to introduce a mount. They had Plessy in Bowser's Fury. Yoshi has been getting a lot of push lately with the latest Mario Galaxy movie, Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, Yoshi being in Mario Galaxy 2, which was just re-released. I've been predicting that all of these things are setting up Yoshi to be playing a significant role with the next 3D Mario game, Yoshi being Mario's mount. But this time, not just being someone who's involved with some levels here and there, but actually a consistent presence throughout the experience. And I don't mean in the sense that Mario will be riding Yoshi 100% of the time, but I do think Yoshi perhaps could even be a companion character where, yeah, you can ride Yoshi, kind of like how Link rides Epona, but then once you get down to parts where it doesn't make sense to be riding around, you can jump off Yoshi, and Yoshi might even follow you around. Not too different from how Donkey Kong had Pauline tagging alongside him for most of the adventure. And so what's interesting about this is that by having Yoshi involved in this way, that gives Nintendo an easy route to offer up some level of cooperative play, as they've been doing for all their different platformers over the last few generations, including the mainline Mario games. But also, too, there can be a lot of unique interactions, puzzles, and platforming events that can be designed around Mario and Yoshi traveling alongside together. Not necessarily just Mario riding on top of Yoshi, but them doing different things, which could lead to some really unique, interesting gameplay segments. But I don't think Nintendo is going to do the obvious thing and just give us an open world Mushroom Kingdom, as cool as that would be, and I'm sure they'll still find a way for us to catch a glimpse of that, but I think they're going to handle things a little differently. But before continuing here, let me just point out I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers, so if you enjoy my videos and you haven't subscribed already, I would very much appreciate that subscription. Let me point out a couple quotes from Shigeru Miyamoto and Bill Trinen, and I think this may give us a little bit more perspective on what I'm kind of getting at here. So back in 2016, both Shigeru Miyamoto and Bill Trinen were in this interview with IGN talking about why they don't call Breath of the Wild open world. And so Miyamoto says, I think within the game industry or the tech industry, there's a tendency to want to name everything. But I think it's important for what we do that we don't want to be dependent or swayed by the technology and what's available now. We want to use the technology and the techniques that are available to make what we want to make. What's important is to really express how we use that to make our experience unique. We didn't want to just make a game where you can do anything, but we wanted to make sure that we make a game where the player is able to do anything, but it's also a form of entertainment. It's fun to do all of those things. That's why we felt that coming up with a name that we created would be best. The term open air is a result of that. And then Bill continues, from my perspective, I look at a lot of open world games, and the world is a setting for the story the developers want to tell in that space. I just look at this game and I see a world that is fully integrated into the exploration and the adventure. It's not just a world that you're passing through, it's sort of a world that you are part of, or so much of the adventure and exploration is in this outdoor space, and the theme of wilderness collectively seemed like open air was the right fit for it. And so Nintendo didn't want to call Breath of the Wild an open world game, but they preferred open air because they believe this phrase better captures what Breath of the Wild is about. Which brings me to my main big point. I'm theorizing here that the next 3D Mario probably will technically be something like an open world game this time. They'll finally make that leap with the technology they have. But I don't think they're going to call it just open world. and I think they're going to do something that's a bit out of the ordinary. What I theorize is that they're going to do something that may be called something like, not open world, not open air, but open space. And it's not to say that Nintendo would be the first company to make an open world experience that's in space, but I have this idea for how they could go about doing it that would just be special, and would certainly figure quite well into the cross-promotional strategy between the Mario Galaxy movie and Galaxy 1 and 2. So my big idea here is that Nintendo goes back to this idea of having planets, but not small little spheres or platforms that connect in a linear fashion for a small level, but rather one giant continuous environment where you have these giant spheres that when you're actually on them don't even necessarily look like a small planet that you can walk around. They have so much size to them that they're essentially kind of like a kingdom in Mario Odyssey or a layer in Donkey Kong Bonanza, but it's one planet in space. But you can look up into the stars with your free roam camera and see what's beyond. You can see other planets out there, and there will be a way to eventually get to these planets, and so you're gonna have this continuous world where you'll have these vast kingdoms that are just big planets. That's kind of like my big theory here for the direction they could go for the next Mario. And obviously that's just my idea, but I think what's leading me to this idea are certainly things that Nintendo is keeping in mind. The fact that they are going to go bigger now, that they are going to go with something more vast and likely interconnected. They're going to take advantage of the hardware and do things that were not possible in prior generations, including the Switch. They're probably not going to look at it as just like another open world game. They're going to try and do something different. And as we've seen Nintendo do dozens of times already, this game will certainly factor into their cross-promotional strategy, and there may even be an element of this game that will have people who have watched the movie be even more interested. It may not go so deep that it's in space like the Mario Galaxy movie, but certainly it being Mario is going to inspire some people to want to pick it up, but they may go a bit deeper than that. And so that leads me to this concept of an open space experience, and I look at that Mario Galaxy movie poster and I see that massive version of the early planet in Mario Galaxy, and it just gets me thinking like, whoa, that is super cool. What if we could explore worlds like that in a new Mario game? I think that is by design. I think the movie is meant to promote the game. It is a big part of why Nintendo has gone into movies now, because you're expanding the reach of the IP. People watch the movies, more people than usual, which then inspires them to want to play more Mario games. And we've documented it. We've seen how the sales are improved, at least with the Mario movie that came out in 2023. It was substantial. I'm sure that's going to happen again. In 2023, Nintendo also put out Mario Wonder to follow the release of the Mario movie. I'm betting that there's going to be a new Mario for the Switch 2 to follow the release of this movie coming out April 1st. And I'm just going to throw out one more wacky idea at you, just continue with this idea of it being open space. How would they go about traversing from one big planet kingdom to another? Well, since we're assuming here that Mario and Yoshi are traveling alongside each other, which I do think is really likely, by the way, even if it's not an open space game, I think they're going to want to think of something, and I don't think it's going to be like Galaxy, where you just get into some sort of spring star or launch star that sends you to the next planet. There's going to need to be some level of connection, so perhaps Yoshi can transform. If Mario can transform, why can't Yoshi? And in these cases, when Yoshi transforms, he transforms into some sort of really cool space dragon that Mario rides, and you fly through the space getting to that next planet kingdom. That's the idea. If they did something like that, it would certainly be fresh and interesting and get a lot of people super hyped. But again, that is just an idea. What Nintendo does remains to be seen, although, as I said, there are certain elements that I'm sure they are keeping in mind that will factor into what we get with this next 3D Mario. And I think it's going to be something that's grand and epic and more than just your typical open world. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.